Now to cut the cable housing, it's best to use a specialised cable cutter like this one. They aren't particularly cheap, but will make for an easier and neater job, so it's definitely a worthwhile investment. If you are happy with the routing of your old cables, then you can just cut the new housing to the same length as the old ones. If you're not sure, then it's best to cut the housing longer than you need and trim down as necessary. It's also likely that the inner lining will be a little squashed after cutting, so open it out with a small nail or something similar. There's also a handy little indent on the cutters that's there to help you get the cable end nice and round. As a final check, make sure the cable runs freely through the end you have cut. Then place a ferrule on each end of the cable housing. For fitting the cables, the first thing to do is make sure that the cable adjusting barrel on the brake caliper is screwed down fully. And then unscrew back about 1 turn. Next, thread the new cable into the lever. Now it can take a bit of careful and patient prodding, but you'll know you've got it when it exits the lever base. Once you've pushed it all the way through, make sure the nipple is seated properly. Then thread the housing onto the cable, obviously making sure you've got the right section. And then push it up snug into the back of the lever. At this point, it's a good idea to push the housing onto the frame clip, as it just stops the cable flapping around. And then you can move on to threading the next section of housing. Once that's clipped onto the frame, thread the cable through the cable adjuster barrel and then through the cable clamp. Now to set a rough adjustment, push the pads against the rim and then release back slightly before you tighten the cable clamp. Finally, snip off the excess cable to leave about 2 to 3 inches. If you leave this amount of length, it will allow you to remove and replace the cable a few times for lubing. And to stop the cable end fraying, squash a crimp onto the end with the blunt part of your cable cutters to give you a nice, neat job. Then again, it's just a case of repeating the exact same procedure for the front brake. But this time, you'll only have one section of housing to deal with. Once both cables are fitted, you can then take them to the bars. And just be aware that a lot of bars these days have channels for the cables to seat into to make them less obvious.